Excellent, thank you. Yes, great. This is the toughest time of the day because I'm between you and lunch and I'm stopping myself. Try to be quick. All right. Yeah, this talk is about DNS hygiene. I think we have talked a little bit about routing hygiene yesterday with RPKI and everything. But as you know, DNS is also a very important component of the internet, and there are best practices out there that it would be good that operators follow. So do you know your hygiene? Do you know your DNS hygiene? So I was looking at Shadow Server, which is an organization that collects data on the DNS, or about the DNS, and managed to pull some statistics from South Africa, the number of reported unique IPs under which there is an open DNS resolver is around 13,000 and basically ranking third in Africa. John talked about DDoS attacks yesterday, and DNS open resolvers can be a source of DDoS attacks. So I guess there are things to do to improve hygiene generally. There's another source of information, CyberGreen. They also run internet-wide scan, and in this case they are showing the count of vulnerable devices. So it's around 30,000 vulnerable devices that were detected in South Africa, but there are some quite weird spikes in January. I don't know what's happening, going up to 400,000 vulnerable devices where an open recursive DNS was actually detected. So if you go on that website, cybergreen.net, and you select South Africa, you can even look whether your ASN has any vulnerable devices. All right, so this brings me to a topic that I would like to bring on here, which is called kindness. So what happens is that on DNS, obviously there are best practices that we would like operators to follow. They are documented in many places, in some of them in RFCs, some of them in best current practice document, BCOP documents. But I believe there isn't like a single place where those best practices were documented. And this is how I guess ICANN came up with the kindness platform. I think they were inspired as well by the manners platform, which is also another best correct practice type of framework where we encourage network operators to adopt a few best practices and actions for them to secure their network. And in this case, it's the same. They are targeting authoritative DNS operators, secondary level DNS operators, and also resolver operators. So let's start with the authoritative DNS operators. What are they recommending? They're recommending that obviously the zone that the authoritative DNS operators is managing must be DNSSEC signed, and obviously the keys that are being used to manage or to sign the zone should be managed in a proper way, like roll over periodically, etc. There shouldn't be transfers between authoritative servers, because an authoritative server should manage a single zone as much as possible. The zone itself should be protected against tampering, so the integrity must be controlled. The authoritative and recursive name servers, as you know, there is authoritative and recursive. They must run on separate infrastructure. It happens, I think, in the past where, for example, you would install Bind and you could actually get both authoritative and recursive on the same system. Usually it was helping people to spin off quickly a DNS server, but the recommendation here is that to split both and have them on separate infrastructure. It is recommended to have at least two name servers for a zone, And as much as possible, the two name servers should be on two different, or on a diversity of network. The diversity means different networks, different ASNs in different geographical places, and if possible also to have different software running those name servers. So a lot of, we have seen now a lot of TLDs or their name servers or anycast, so which is great, which add a lot of redundancy. And finally, monitoring. No need to tell you that for any critical service that you run, you need to monitor the service. So these are the set of recommendations. They go on for the authoritative, but they have the same, almost the same for the secondary level. And then they have a set of recommendations for the resolvers. For example, you must do DNSSEC validation, so on and so forth. But what can we actually measure? Because a lot of those practices that they mention out, not all of them we can measure. We can only measure those that we have access to. For example, open resolvers, we can detect them in the wild. We can also know what are the authoritative name servers, because these information are out publicly. So these are the places where we can actually run measurements. So again, what can we measure? DNSSEC adoption is something that we can measure using active scans, research projects such as OpenIntel and Rapid7. They also provide very good statistics. Geographical, topological diversity, all these can also be detected usually using active scan. QNAME minimization, which is an important mechanism for privacy. It should be implemented by resolvers. Can also be detected using passive and active scans. So, as you can see, a few of those components can be detected using measurements. And some statistics, these are not mine, they are coming from a paper that was published last year. So out of 638,000 IPs that were detected, 52% of them have a web port open. So if you are running a DNS name server, you shouldn't have a web port open on a DNS name server. Around 40% have a mail port open, 31% have an SSH port open, and they found other popular ports such as FTP, Windows Share, etc. More now on recursive resolvers. About 1.6 million resolvers that were detected. 8% have web ports open, 6% have SSH port open, and 5% have telnet ports open, on top of having other services which shouldn't be there normally. And there we also found in that list of practices that are actually provided or recommended by ICANN, that a few of them obviously are difficult to measure. Monitoring, because this is internal to your network. ACL, what are the ACL filters that you put to allow access, for example, only to your customers? We cannot know that. Whether you are using, which authentication systems are you using for SSH, and what type of hardening are you doing on your server, etc. These are things that we cannot measure because it's internal to your system. And also we found that if you imported things that are actually being in use in the DNS ecosystem are not being measured here, are not being even considered as a best practice. For example, anycast deployment for critical zone. We haven't found anything mentioned in the kindness design, DNS provider diversity. Remember the DIN 2016 incident. So these are things that we could look at. Caching best practices, having long TTL values could increase resilience against DDoS attack, and also preventing lame delegations. This can be of an issue, for example, increasing DNS resolution time on the internet. I used references from these papers that was published last year at a measurement conference, and that's it. That was quite short, I believe. Thank you.
Great. Anybody have any questions or comments?